All right, it's official. So welcome back, spring break, week 9, and I have put off this conversation on fake news and researching. You all know that I wanted to bring it forward with the informative conversation, but we did just a lot of content, So now seems like a perfect time to actually invest in what is fake news, how is it related to research, which we're going to be doing more of for our persuasive speeches, and what are the best ways to kind of figure out if you are using research that's going to support your ideas in an authoritative way, right? So you want to make sure that the research you're finding is not just any old Joe Blow who's out there writing on his blog, although there are some awesome people who are writing great things on their blog. You just want to make sure that you hit all the check marks so that you're not the one who's being accused of perpetuating fake news or spreading rumors, if we want to put it on street language. Stop the gossip, right? So today, I'll start with the research strategies. There's actually 3 things that I want to talk to you all about. And the first one is best research strategies for your speech. And that will lead us into how to annotate or break down the most important parts of your speech. And then once you've figured out how to break down those parts of the speech, then how to take that information and use it when you're speaking and delivering your speech so that we know as an audience you've done your homework to make sure that you are credible. All right? So that's the focus of this particular lesson. I think that most of us are intuitively already doing some of these things, but I hope that this conversation will make us much more conscious of how we're doing it so that our audience is also conscious of that and that's clear to them.
Yeah.
All right, this picture should seem hopefully familiar to some folks out there. I know, Isabel, you're, commuting from Riverside, but you do come to campus. So hopefully you've seen the inside of the library before. There are some people. There are some people like Tanya who's in Germany and Will who's in New York. And so I know that they probably have not seen the inside of our beautiful library, but I'm old school. So I'm going to start with the best research strategy is just going to the library. And this could even be your local public library. We spend a lot of time at the Oceanside Library. They have a lot of resources that are really useful. Oh, but our library, I'm not sure if we know this as, members of the community college system, but our library is cutting edge. We have resources and faculty and staff who work in the library who are top-notch in the state. They compete with the 4-year universities, and our access to knowledge is really, really good here. So I think that the best research strategy is just take yourself down to the library and sit in the stacks for a little while. Books, magazines, newspapers, digital academic databases, films, documentaries, historical documents, collections, archives that you can't take home, but that might be really, really useful or unique to your conversation. And for me, the best part is you actually have access to real librarians who have been trained to deal with this information. I'm not saying go down to the library and go on a scavenger hunt by yourself, although that could be fun too. I'm saying go down to the library with an intention and ask the librarian to help you figure out how to get 10 resources so you can figure out the best way to target kind of the information, right? There's a lot of stuff down there and they know where it's at. It's their closet. They know where they've organized things and where they've put it. So don't be afraid to ask them. Lauren the librarian, I love that. In my head, it's always hashtag Laura the librarian. She's really awesome. And so she's somebody that I connect with and can help you find good resources. So anyways, I've done my Mama Doc spiel on the library. We know that the information there has already been fact checked. We know that it's been put through the authoritative process of reviews from peers, from publishers. So all the information down at the library is going to be credible. You're not really worried about, am I going to find a stack of fake news sitting in this part of the library? Probably not. Right? They're going to label it and identify it as what type of information it is. So again, that's another kind of positive of going down to the library. Put that there in terms of like all the different things. Now, I'm a realistic person, mostly because I know my own practices. And so I'm going to ask the question, what do most people do instead of going to the library? And I'm going to do this and say, no judgment. We open up Google and do a basic as AF search and say, let's just figure out what's going on in the world. And there is some crazy number that I had in a presentation a couple weeks ago. It was like 51,000 new questions are entered into Google each day. Like brand new questions, like never before entered into the database. And so every day there are like these 50,000 new questions that just get entered into Google. So I'm not saying that, you know, Google is a bad resource. I'm actually saying it's one of the #1 resources that we turn to today. And YouTube is actually the third search engine that people use today as well. So rather than diss Google, I'm gonna actually teach us how to invest in using Google so you can get most credible resources out of your experience. So let me close out of this PowerPoint presentation. And we will go into Google and see what they have here. Now, what usually happens is most times when you go in here, let's say you're interested in, I'm having this conversation with myself right now on whether or not I should homeschool my children. Single mother, I have some very satisfactory things about the school, but also some things that I'm like, I have concerns and I wonder if my children are getting the best possible education possible. So I go onto Google and I say, you could just do basic homeschooling. And anything and everything basically pops up, right? And this could be a positive thing and it can be a negative thing. It could be a positive thing because it gives you a basic overview and it helps you jumpstart kind of what the conversation is about homeschooling. But as I scroll through this, I see a lot of ads. I see a lot of like, okay, schools in the area, but not a whole lot of details. It just gives me some mapping. A lot of noise, right? Like things that don't necessarily answer my question about whether or not this is going to be the best opportunity for my children, what the benefits are, what the drawbacks are, where the communities for homeschoolers are, if San Diego has particular legal kind of ramifications that I need to follow. What are my responsibilities as a parent if I choose to actually go into homeschooling? So this is not giving me any of that information. And I could probably go through the search engine and put, you know, 10, 12 different phrases or terms in there that will present different resources, but we're going to be getting a lot of noise along the way. So the question that we need to ask is, how do we cut through the noise? How do we cut through all the kind of BS at the top to get to the real fruitful information in the bottom? So you might be familiar with your lovely profile picture if you have one attached to your Google account. And next to this is this little 9 box up here, which just presents a series of Google apps. And if you scroll through this, you'll see the Google Drive, you'll see YouTube, you can access email. And if you just keep scrolling, click on even more from Google, it'll give you Google Scholar. It's taking us into all their products. Let's just do this. It took us into all their products and I don't want to do that. So I just went straight to Google Scholar. I put Google Scholar in the Google search engine and lo and behold, here's what pops out is this googlescholar.com. So if you click on that, notice that the search engine changes a little bit, right? You'll see here that you can specify what type of information you want. Do you want articles? Do you want case law, right? And I'm going to just put, I'm going to add benefits to homeschooling. And immediately you notice that instead of having all that noise with the advertisements and the maps and take you over here to this Wikipedia website, you have more specified information that gives you either the name of the resource, the journal article, or the newspaper article, or however you've kind of like identified it. And you can kind of see that it gets you to more specific, in-depth ideas that emerge out of the conversation of homeschooling. So here's the harms of homeschooling. Here's the well-adjusted child, the social benefits of homeschooling, beyond the bricks, homeschooling students with special needs. So hundreds of 10 pages worth of resources. And if I click next, it'll probably go to another 10 pages. So still a lot of information, but the primary difference is that you know that these are coming from credible sources. You can see that it's marked the British Journal of Sociology of Education. You have access to the abstract, and it tells you where it came from, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the kind of cool thing about the internet. The internet's going to say, here's this article that might be useful to you if you want to check out homeschooling in the context of private education. But we still know that this is an academic journal that is a part of a larger business and economic system. And so in order to get access, you're going to have to pay such and such, such and such. Please don't pay any money on Google or any like search engine on Google. What you should do instead is go to your library online. So click on the home page, click on our library. And you can basically use our databases to find the article that you may have already identified on Google, right? So, and you can do this. I actually think that going to the library resource first might help you to cut through the noise easier. But I also know that my thumbs, when I'm on my phone, immediately go to, oh, here's Chrome, open up Google, let's do a Google search, right? So I'm kind of teaching you the connection between both because I want to meet you where you are. I know who we are as people in the world. But that being said, our library, again, is cutting edge and has wonderful resources. So if you find an article that you can't access on Google search, Google Scholar, don't be afraid to use the MiraCosta library to say, hey, maybe we have it here. And lo and behold, you will find that 98.9% of the time, you'll be able to download the article because you've already paid for your access to it. You paid your tuition to be able to take the class, you enrolled in the class, you're participating, that rolls over into the library. The library buys a prescription from the journal, so we get it quarterly every time it comes out, and that's how the system works. So use us, that's what we're here for. The resources were definitely purchased with you in mind. So back to Google here. I really like Google. I just think that this is smart. It means that basically anybody has access to quality research, that we don't necessarily have to scroll through our Facebook, news feed to be able to find the best information, or to scroll through Twitter news feed to find the best information. And you'd be surprised how social media has drastically changed the way that we interact with information and what we see as true and what we see as false. So this Google Scholar gives it a more academic feel. It roots it in peer review, so we know that the information has been verified by a number of different sources before it actually is published for us to actually read and review. What I want to point us out to is, let's say we do want to just do a basic search. We don't want to do, let's just go back to Google. Ooh. I know, it took me all over the place. Back to regular Google. And let's just say we want to do something quick and easy on a top. Isabel, do you have a topic for a problem, solution, or anything you're thinking about or tossing out there? Or maybe that you're just interested in, seeing researched?
No. I'm kind of blank right now.
Of course not. Okay, so let's say we just want to do something quick to say what's in the news right now. Boeing. They were just talking about the airplanes with Boeing. Okay, so Boeing and 737. Let's just do that. Okay. So we see the top story. Southwest Airlines says Boeing 737 MAX groundings are hurting sales. Just gonna click on that. When you're researching, you're not just researching to understand the conversation and to know kind of what you want to talk about, but you're also researching to figure out how do you borrow other people's ideas to help them strengthen your ideas, right? I take it back to kind of real everyday layman's street kind of analogies. And I think about it in terms of if you are going into a street fight, how many people do you want to have your back, right? Do you want to have 5 people with you, or do you want to go by yourself and act like, no ego, I'm gonna take everybody down? That's not gonna happen. Somebody's gonna hit you, you're gonna come down, and you're not gonna be able to get back up. I mean, for me, if I'm going into a situation like that, I want to bring all the backup, all the tools, all the weapons that I possibly can, so I know what my resources are. It's a little crude, but for me, that's always stuck. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. I don't want to just go in and fight by myself. I want to bring my mama, my auntie, my cousin, my daddy, everybody on the block, right?
And aunties.
Everybody. Yeah. So I think it's the same way with your resources and with your research. When you use the pop-it method, when you get to the proof, that's when you insert, your right hook here and your, uppercut here. And those are when you put your power punches and you say, CNN said, as Southwest Airlines is still going to run, Boeing 737. So it's not just Isabel, regular Isabel, who's wonderful in the world, saying, by the way, did you hear that Southwest is not going to be flying their airlines? No, it's Isabel reciting the source from CNN, because CNN actually went out and talked to the big people and did the interviews and got all the, hands-on stuff. And you have found them to be an authority on this information, and they help you sound more credible. Right? So that's how we're using this information here. And when you read through these articles, you want to try to find out what the most important information is. Inside of the Unit 3 information, the fake news source annotation and signposting, there are a couple resources here that kind of will help you weed through which websites and which articles that are published online are going to be most useful to you. And they point you to kind of what you should be looking for to best support your information. So facts are good. Statistics are great. Quotations from authoritative experts are really good. Testimonials that serve as positive examples. And they give you specifics about what each one happens to be and how they work to help trigger credibility in the mind of your audience. So that's a good resource to just thumb through. And it's a quick kind of read that gives you some clear examples. And then underneath that, I already talked about this a little bit, but social media, again, has changed the way that we interact with information. So most people have most people are critical thinkers about whether or not they believe the information. The example that comes to mind immediately is the Jussie Smollett situation. Y'all know he was in the media for about 2.5 weeks, really hot about whether or not his situation, he'd really been beat up by whoever he had been beat up by, and whether or not it's something that he staged. Lots of folks were like, oh, I'm not quite sure if this is a situation that is true, that is false. The Chicago police came in and said, we're going to charge him with false, filing a false police report. And for me, I was super suspect. I didn't think it was fake news, but at the same time, I was like, none of this really logically fits together for me as a reader and a critical thinker as I put this information together. And then lo and behold, yesterday, when I was driving, dropping my kids off, 30 seconds on NPR, and they dropped this Jussie Smollett, all the charges have been dropped. Okay. So social media has definitely changed the way we interact with information. It changes whether or not we read information as credible. We no longer think that just because it's in the news or just because it's in the media that it's true, right? Mm-hmm. We have to filter it to be able to say, do we trust media? These charts here show that our trust in mass media has dropped significantly, over 20% in just the last 10 years. And if you think about YouTube came out in 2005, so it's not even 15 years old yet. And look how much it's impacted the way that we interact with mass media, right? That's just one example of one kind of platform that has helped to change that. So I think that for us, as we are wonderful digital players and we all participate in technology, that we have to learn how to read through the information to find out what's good and what's not, what's useful to us, what's going to make us sound like an authority, what's going to give us credibility, rather than what's going to tell the next person in the audience, I don't know, $3,500 to beat you up and pretend, I don't know, Jussie Smollett, that just seems like, that's not a whole lot, right? You want your audience to be nodding their head I get that. That makes total sense, right? So here are a couple things that you can do as you're reading through your news articles and your online kind of websites, your blogs even, to say, this is a good resource for me to use, or this is not really a good resource for me to use. This infographic that I embedded into the page here is just how to spot fake news. One, you really want to consider the source. Click away from the story to investigate the website, see if you can find its mission, if it has any contact information, if there's any publishing information. Those are things that are going to tell you that there are real people who are actually running the website and have filtered the source, the information for you. You want to read beyond the headlines as well, right? Like even my conversation, I could have titled this, best research practices, but it's not clickbait. Nobody's interested in talking about best research practices and how to go down to the library, right? So if I say, let's talk about fake news today and why it's actually relevant, then people are like, oh yeah, fake news. Like, well, that's titillating, it's spectacle. Same thing, right? People are really smart. They want to get you to actually click onto that website or click onto that particular article. We need to read beyond the headlines to make sure that it's not just some outrageous kind of statement to get you to say, oh, snap, click and share, right? Don't perpetuate the gossip. Read beyond the headline to figure out what it's talking about. Do a little bit of information about the author. All right, so if you like this author and you're like, oh, this sounds really interesting, and they say that they're an expert in anthropology and they did this research, maybe I'll just do a quick Google search of that author to see if maybe they're actually as credible as they are. Have they done other studies? Who do they work with, right? Who have they studied under? Who have they trained? All of those things help you to figure out whether or not they are actually an authority or if they gave themselves a title to make themselves sound fancy online, right? Like these days, the digital has made a lot of things about representation. If you say that you're a digital expert in content management on Instagram, okay, great. But what does that mean, right? Like what are the standards that make you a content manager expert on Instagram? Does that mean that you run 25 Instagram accounts? Does that, we have to know who these people are and to make sure that they're actual credible. So research the author, know who's actually writing the information and the ideas that we're forwarding. Another thing, we've talked about this, in fact, this is the center of kind of our conversation today, is do they have supporting resources? Are they backed up by their community? Are they borrowing conversations in their community? Are their ideas in conversation with other ideas in the community? And if they're not, then maybe that's something that isn't credible because other people aren't actually talking about the same idea or same conversation. Right? So do they have supporting resources? Don't be afraid to click around on their resources. Sometimes these pages put links and we just scroll through them thinking we're not going to go to that page. Click on those links. Where do those pages take you? Do they take you to some dark and mysterious place that you didn't expect? Right? Because again, those are kind of clickable baits that people use to kind of take you down a wild trail, and it's a big adventure in internet land. So make sure you are clicking on the supporting resources to figure out whether or not those are really credible. Oh, this is a good one, and I know I've been hooked by this before in the past. Check the date of the article. Right? Again, maybe something super clickbait and titillating in the title where it's like, oh snap, this happened. It did 4 years ago. It is like no longer relevant. And so you're over here all excited, like, I can't believe this happened. Did you see that? And really it's like, that's such old news, So make sure that you are posting relevant and significant information. Sometimes that means that it's up to date. It could have happened yesterday. I mean, that's the most relevant research that we have on the topic at hand, right? My daughter's doing a jogathon. They only have 24 hours left in the jogathon. So the most up-to-date information is she has like $89 worth of donations. Woohoo! Right? Like, great. And then I know it's really sweet because I'm a bad mom. I was talking all kind of on Facebook, okay? So we're doing it. So that's most up-to-date information. Now, if you're doing a speech that's more historical, or you need to have something that talks about kind of the origins of it, then yes, you might actually go to the original resource that person wrote in 1898. And that's going to make you sound really credible too. Just make sure you're checking the date, you know how it's being used, so nobody calls you out and says, hey, like that was like a long time ago. You really need to think about that, okay? You might want to ask yourself if this is a joke. I know even this kind of seems kind of funny, but I read through things sometimes and I'm appalled and I'm like, OMG, like what is going on here? And then I'm like, oh, this is the Onion. It's irony, right? Like I'm thinking this is just disgusting. I cannot believe that they would even write something like this. How, oh, somebody's using satire. Thank you. But the joke's on me because I didn't get it. So something seems super outlandish or super like, I can't believe this happened in the world, then click around to see whether or not it is actually a joke and maybe somebody is doing a spoof on somebody else. And they do have newspaper kind of like sites like The Onion who do that regularly. So check around for that. It's kind of hard sometimes to distinguish. The last two, I think, are really about us as searchers, researchers, if you will. One, we just need to check our biases to make sure that we are actually looking at all sides of the topic, right? Let's say, for instance, I think I used in one of my last videos kind of a political conversation on if you want to do research on the new presidential candidates. Great. But we also need to make sure that we know that we check biases. Right? Like maybe you lean towards like Republican or maybe you lean towards Democrat. Well, if you lean towards one way, just make sure you're trying to balance out kind of the perspective so that you're not putting your framework on everything and that you're reading the information from the author's perspective without judging everything along the way, right? You really want to make sure that you understand the author's perspective and that you can say it the way they want it to be said and you understand their message. That way, when you use it in your speech, even if you counter it, you take them on their own terms. That's just a respect thing with using other people's knowledge. I know that when I say something, I want to be quoted accurately, right? Like even if it's just like, you know, I'm yelling at my kids, say what I said accurately and the way that I said it so you understand exactly what I said. Then you can tell me your thoughts on it. That's just called good dialogue. Right? So you got to respect the author and check your own biases. And then finally, don't be afraid to ask the experts. If you are unsure or have a question or just like, I'm thinking about it like this, is this correct? Ask. Reach out and ask people. If there's information on the website and it gives you contact information, or if there's a chat box where you can actually ask reach out and ask. You would be surprised how willing people are to share information with you and the type of information that you can get. You might end up saying, I didn't understand what this author said in this article, but he had contact information on his Instagram. So I'm going to DM him on Instagram and see what he said. This actually happens to me all the time. Like random students, a student from London read one of my articles from a conference and like send me a DM on Twitter. Twitter is the least like used social media that I use. And found me and was like, can I get a copy of that article? And I sent it to her. And we started this conversation about the topic and how it was helping her, her project that she happened to be doing. So take a leap of faith. Sometimes it's a little weird, but what's the worst thing to say? No. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm ending with that kind of like, you know, caveat. Like if we take a leap of faith to be able to check our resources, ask the experts, and just do a little checking. And these things are on each one of the sites. And so if we go back to CNN and close out their ads and we go through here, we can find all of this information. Here's the title. Here's the author, Chris Isidore. He's writing specifically in the CNN Business Time. It was updated this yesterday. Today's Wednesday. Today at 8 a.m. Eastern time, right? So all this information is already there. You just have to be conscious to kind of identify it and to know, okay, this is where I'm going to use it, right? Now, the last little bit in the last 2.5 minutes that I have here is to say, once you have that information, then you need to be able to use it to your advantage when you are delivering your speech. Right? We do this in our essays already, so we're already aware that we need to introduce our information. You might say something like, according to CNN, March 27th, 2019, Chris Isidore wrote that Southwestern, blah, 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 blah. And you can see that, oh, CNN, oh, on this date, oh, by this author, and the title of this was this. Do you need every single one of those points? No. But 2 to 3 of them, again, that power punch, right? Gives you a lot of credibility. Oh, Chris Isidore, who writes for CNN Business, he wrote yesterday. And then it makes you sound like I'm up to date, right? And I think about it again, I'll go back to those crude kind of examples like gossip. It's just good gossip. Like, I want to know who gave you the gossip. Don't tell me, oh, your boyfriend was flirting with blah, 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 and I saw him at McDonald's. If you don't give me the specifics, was it Katie? Was it Catherine? Was it Kylie? Was it, tell me the information, right? Like, you want to make sure that
Where?
all
What time? Where was I? Where was you? What were you doing?
What time was it? Was he on the phone? I was on Facebook at that time. Like, I mean, it's so funny, but I really think we have our relationship investigators who give us the most, like, the best practices for figuring out how to check all the marks before you make your decision, right? What awful examples, but y'all get it.
Yeah, if you can research and find something out like that, then you can do something like this. You know what I mean?
100%. And I think that we get better value of it when we do it towards this kind of purpose, because then it's a skill set that you use professionally and not just in your personal life.
Yeah. Yeah. Women should know how to do all this.
Listen, women aren't the only one. I have seen some men do some pretty heavy investigating along the way. So y'all are good researchers at heart. I said this at the beginning. Y'all are intuitive. You know what you're doing already. I'm just wanting to bring this to the consciousness as you're putting together your speeches. Pull the quotations out and put them on your outline, the full quotation on your outline, and highlight, like, you know, how you're going to introduce it and signpost it with according to or as stated by or as explained by, so that you know these are kind of these are the terms I'm going to use to help make sure I verbalize this is where I'm at. Once you get good with that, you won't need to do that on the paper anymore, because it'll be already soaked up and become a part of your intuition as a speaker. So. Anywho, I mean, I think that covered it. I expected it was going to go 20 minutes. It's already 35 minutes. And so I will make sure that I upload this onto Canvas for you all later this evening, and hopefully it will come in handy. And, you know, if you have any follow-up questions, you all can always reach out to me. So thanks for being my audience, Isabel.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon. Bye.